Welcome, everyone, to the Energy Advisors Podcast. I'm your host, Rex, that energy guy. Glad to have you with us, listening in or watching, regardless of where you are. And we just picked up our 18th country. So we got listeners all over the place. I'm shooting for Antarctica, but I don't know if I can get on any research ships yet. So I hope that we can get that going. I'm excited for today's guest today, but before we go there, I always have to thank the partners in our show. They make this all possible, and we are really connected to some interesting people in the industry. Partner we want to thank is TaxHive. Good guys out there. When you look at renewables, solar, well, any of the technologies, the financial aspects of one of the pillars is tax credits, rebates, and incentive programs. And so we have partnered with TaxHive to help people understand that. We have a partnership with them. So if you want to get the best information, legit people that don't make crazy claims, it's our good friends at TaxHive, which is a Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful company. So go to taxhive.com. Other partner in the program is our good friends at Universal Wind Kinetics. If you have not looked at micro wind technology, you need to take a look. It has had major jumps, just like solar has, in innovation. A single turbine can actually produce at wind speeds 1,500 watts an hour. So that's almost 4 solar panels. So pretty good stuff. Universal Wind Kinetics. So glad to have them with us. Our friends over at Go Green Community Initiative. We love what they're doing. Go Green Community Initiative is a nonprofit, educational nonprofit that just helps people understand what can be done in renewables. End-to-end free energy audit and allow you to get information on a non-biased perspective. So as you're moving forward, you can get some facts and then be able to go shopping off of the results from that. And lastly, but most important, just because they're a big sponsorship in the show, is our friends over at Smart Energy Centers. Smart Energy Centers are open across the United States. That's a retail footprint in the front of Walmart stores. And don't think that Walmart's not green. Walmart's actually one of the greenest companies on the planet. Their entire corporate campus is run on renewables. But Smart Energy Centers are bringing intelligent systems, so smart systems integrated with solar, storage, and just about everything you can think of touching energy. So anyway, all right, well that's it. All the housekeeping is out of the way. We want to introduce our guest today. It's been a long time coming. A lot of times I reach out and talk to people, and wow, it takes a little bit of time to get them on the show. And I've been wanting to get these folks on. So I'd like to welcome to the show today, James Quazi of Balto Energy. Okay. And they're doing some pretty interesting things. And so James, welcome in.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. So, it's not all just about the technology. We like to talk about the people who run and power our industry. And so what I would like to do is tell us a little bit about the James story. And again, we don't have to go back to year of birth or what you did in 3rd grade or those types of things, but give us a glimpse about how you sort of got here, some milestones along the way, and then we'll dump in and talk about what you folks are doing.
Okay, great. So my entire background's been in climate tech or clean tech. We called it various things over the years. In 2006, I started a company. I was 25 at the time with a good friend that dealt with energy modeling. So back then, people got flat bills. There was no real way to understand how you're using energy in your home. And our thesis was that if we could sort of disaggregate and show people where they use energy, they would make better decisions. So that was like that was the entirety of the company. It was a software solution, scrape a lot of information online, some site observed data. And we had some early success. We ran that company for 4 years. And in 2010, Solar City bought it. And I ended up at Solar City for about 5 years through a huge growth phase. So I think we doubled year over year, went through an IPO in the course of those 5 years, and then a transition to Tesla. I absolutely loved that experience when we traded for anything. It was a very transformative time in the solar industry, particularly residentially, with the advent of like financial products like leases and PPAs and that sort of thing. Really, it was the accelerant for the industry. That was like sort of a 10-year run up for me and starting a company at sort of a young age for me. And then, these 5 years of Solar City. I had just recently had my first kid, and I was substantially sort of burnt out, even though I was like energized by the problem. But I thought I would take a year off and just figure out what was next. So in the course of that year off, I got a call from some people at Google X, and Google X is sort of like a ideas laboratory, division of Google that works on what they call moonshot projects. And they were making a big push into climate tech at that point. And they said, hey, listen, you might be a good fit for this. Why don't you come down to Mountain View? We can show you what we've got going on, and you can see, you can sort of make your own assessment. So I did. I went down, and sure enough, there's like a lot of like, truly interesting and truly bizarre projects happening, like very outlandish, but with good intention and like substantive things. It was good enough for me. So I ended up spending 2 years at X, working specifically on a project that internally we called Tiny Line. They all have like code names.
Sure.
But the project later became a company called Dandelion Energy that was essentially how to commercialize ground source heat pumps in the same way as residential solar had been commercialized. So it's a bit of a different problem. So we had to find ways to get pipe in the ground really cheaply. We developed a heat pump. We instrumented that heat pump. We had it manufactured in the United States. We had an embedded team. We had a very granular sense of control on that and monitoring, which I was very proud of. And we essentially, after 2 years of X, we spun it out into its individual company, moved a bunch of people from Mountain View to New York to start, and we were kind of off to the races. I was at Dandelion for about 4 years.
Okay.
Through the start of the pandemic, which was very difficult for a service-based company. But Dandelion weathered the storm for sure. I left for entirely personal reasons, and have since moved to San Diego, and very recently have taken 4 years off to just raise kids and be a stay-at-home dad and do some lessons and that sort of thing.
Nice.
And that kind of brings us up to, maybe about a year ago when I started kind of getting back into the industry in a number of ways and decided to start this company, Balto Energy.
Okay. So let me back up just a little bit, just so our listeners understand, because it's always interesting to there. Did you have any like particular education that aimed you in this particular direction? You get out of school, what did your education foundation look like? Because you've spent your career here, as you've talked. I mean, what did that look like? And were there any influences that made you jump into this industry?
Yeah, so educational back, I went to Cornell as an undergraduate. That was sort of graduating from undergraduate was the end of my sort of formal educational adventure. It turns out that if you do well enough in your first year at Cornell, you get sort of like a wide berth to study what you want to.
Mm-hmm.
I chose to study a lot of like engineering and architecture. Those were like the two things. And I had sort of like two experiences that were sort of formative. One was in high school. I actually spent a summer in Australia replanting our rainforest in North Queensland, and that like really kind of got me hooked on climate and environment. So that was a big deal. And then freshman year at Cornell, I heard a lecture from the former dean of architecture at UVA on how we should design products and buildings and other things in a way that has like accounts for life cycle costs and energy and all sorts of things. And that to me was like a defining sort of or a guiding moment for me.
Okay. No, it's good to know because a lot of people on there, and it's interesting because I have a life cycle management background there. So we'll talk about some of that stuff. Okay. So fast forward to today, and you guys, I understand is you just really launched back in June this year.
Yep.
tell us about the vision for what you're doing, and then let's dive into like some of your services, and then how do you go to market, how do you monetize, stuff like that. So let's fast forward up to what got you to June, and let's talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. That sounds great. I'll take a half a step back, which was only to say that I was sort of not disconnected, but out of the industry for several years.
Uh-huh.
I did maintain like ties through some like very sort of casual angel investing
Hmm.
that I've done, usually in great product teams that didn't have like a good business case, but I liked the technology. It was through one of those investments that I heard about a change in the net metering policy in California
Sure.
and how it would devastate the industry. And to be honest, I was like very dismissive at the start. I was like, listen, I've been on this ride for a long time. It's always a roller coaster. It feels existential. It oftentimes is not. But I was convinced to take a deeper look into it. And and my initial learning was like, wow, this is a really big deal. So in like 30 seconds or less, because I'm sure everyone or most of your listeners understand the new net energy metering policy in California, which will likely get exported in other places, sort of changes the value proposition for homeowners in a way that so I live in San Diego, I've got a 10 kilowatt system on my roof. If
Yep.
I'm not home during the day, I export energy to the grid.
Sure.
My system, which I put on 3 years ago, is under an M2 policy where I get
Okay.
paid in parity. So if I buy from the grid or if I sell to the grid, it's the same dollars. Now under an M3,
And that was a
so I'm
1-to-1 ratio at that time, right?
1 to 1 for sure.
Okay, great.
And now there's a schedule by hour of the year that values the export energy. And that value, though there's a wide range of outcomes, the 90% outcome is it's worth in California, let's say 5 to 8 cents. Whereas
Right.
in San Diego, I pay 38 to 52 cents a kilowatt hour for energy. So it's valued considerably less. So if I were to put on the same system that I have on my house now under this different policy, the economics would be drastically different for me as a homeowner.
Right. You know, I studied the net metering. I'm a participant here in the Colorado Solar and Storage Association. And luckily, we have law in Colorado, so the PUC just can't cave. All right, they can whine, and they can, all the utility companies can come there, but we're locked in by law. But not everybody has that. There's 37
Yeah,
states, and if you really take a look back, it was like a double-barreled shot at the industry in California when you combined net metering 3.0 and then interest rates. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
it decimated things. And for listeners who really haven't thought about this, it really takes rooftop solar out of the reach of a lot of people because if you're paying 38 to 52 cents a kilowatt, and then now you're going to finance a rooftop solar that might be 40,000, depending on installers, dealer fees, loan fees, all of those types of things, it kind of makes rooftop solar. It's almost a juxtaposed to what the intent was because you take people out of the market. You
Yeah,
don't want a technology that is Alexis technology that only people with lots of resources can do it. And I spent 3.5 decades in tech, and I look at it and I go, wow, can you imagine if my notebook computer or my iPhone or whatever was dependent on these complexities of like net metering and
yeah.
tax credits. So it's really, in my opinion, makes rooftop solar in particular very volatile.
Well, I think so. I agree. We have seen a lot of the volatility in the solar industry in California. Installations are down pretty considerably year over year. I think the immediate thing I thought, like, so my sort of thought journey on this was one like, yes, this is actually a really big problem. And then the second thought was like, the solution is like somewhat obvious, and it's something that we talked about at Solar City back in 2010, which is at some point we need to convert all these appliances to electricity and then power them with cheap on-site renewable energy. That was our goal.
Sure.
Now, in 2010, like, and you can build like super widgety calculators around this. And I think I've done it like a dozen times and I always delete them because they're really easy. But if you take like the retail cost of electricity and then natural gas, and then the efficiency of a heat pump and the efficiency of like gas-fired piece of equipment and the cost of solar, with those five inputs, you can tell if this is a strong value proposition for an end user or not. Now, in 2010, it was not,
Yeah,
or it was marginal. And in the 4 years or so that, again, I was at swim lessons or whatever, I think what had happened, I think the exciting thing for me is what happened is we crossed the threshold where now it makes a ton of sense for homeowners to electrify
sure.
and power it with, let's say, 10 or 12 cents solar.
Yeah.
And the entire project gets more complex. It's a little bit bigger, but the economics are wildly attractive. And that's what got me excited. And that was the first reason to start Balto as a company.
Right. Okay. So, and I'm in violent agreement with you, all these things. It's hard. And I'm working on a small project, and we might call it a book coming up, but one of the challenges that I see in the industry, and I know you're going to nod on this probably, is as the current model that the utility companies are construed, or how they're formed today, there's going to have to be some changes.
Oh, 100%.
You can't have them constituted the same way, but yet, in fairness, as consumers, I don't want anybody to tell me what I can and can't deploy on my house. But then I also have to be a little bit fair and say, well, I can't push the utility company out of business because someone's got to maintain the grid. So there's got to be this intersection, and there are not a whole lot of great answers for that yet. And it's as things continue to change, we're going to see that model propagated out because 75% or so of the electricity delivered in the United States is delivered by stockholder companies. And so those people aren't going to walk away from their investments, right? I mean, so it
Yep.
really gets complex. All right, so back to what did you put together with your current company? Tell us a little bit more, the vision of what you have, and then what you provide. Because people go out to your website, you kind of look like a dual-headed monster here with things for the consumer and then also things for the contractors.
Yeah. So just explicitly answering that question, I think, at the end of the day, we want consumers to adopt an electrified lifestyle and a suite of products. We think that the logical go-to-market is through solar contractors
Hmm.
because they're the ones having conversations with homeowners about energy in the home.
Yeah.
So that is like the explicit answer to the last question. In terms of what we're doing, I think it's twofold at the start. Our thesis is um, for a customer to make a decision, they need a suite of information that currently does not exist in one place.
Right.
So a lot of these products today, whether we're talking about heat pumps or EVs or solar or storage, they're interactive by nature. Like if you adopt one, it affects like how you would adopt another. And the way the industry is laid out right now is it's very siloed into like, EVs and solar storage and heat pumps and water heating and whatever the case
Exactly.
is. So our goal there, very tactically, is like for each home, and I'll take my own home as an example, I can fit up to 30 panels on my roof, and that is constrained by available roof area and shading and all sorts of other things. So, that's one set. Then I could have one or many batteries, and I currently have an EV, and I might get another one, and I could consider a heat pump and a heat pump water heater. So there's all these options. And if I permutate out the solution set for each individual home, it ends up being, let's say, several hundred to 1,000 different flavors of electrification that you could do, all with different varied outcomes.
Right.
So our goal is to sort of expand that solution set for each home. And this is like a computationally like rigorous process, but it's something that like, we've got some experience doing and we built a tool to do it. And then once you have that total sort of solution set, we have a tool that allows a homeowner to search the solution space for the sort of thing that's the set of goods or services that's right for them.
Right.
And we contextualize it at the start in sort of three goal seeks. So 3 ways to start, and then you can sort of iterate from there. But like so very quickly, the first one is a very traditional sort of give me the best financial return. Of all the 1,000 projects, which one has the best financial return for me?
Right.
So that's like one goal. See, the second two that are more emergent, two is, yeah, like I want a great financial outcome, but also, you know, I'm experiencing outages, and I want to be able to power this set of critical loads or my entire home for this duration. And I'm not, and for this part, like, yeah, give me great finances, but like for this part, I'm not cost sensitive around it. I'll add a battery or 2 batteries if I can do the thing that I want to do.
Okay.
And then the third one is, and we saw this at Solar City, or we were starting to see it as like, I think our default position in the early days is that we had to deliver like day one savings for there to be meaningful adoption. And I think what we learned ourselves into was that there was a certain segment of the population, mostly like retirees or people that were about to retire, that just they're like willing to pay and even pay at parity, but they just didn't want the volatility in bills. So they were like, hey, listen, like I experienced my bill going up 3 to 5 to 7% year over year. Is there a way that I can adopt a renewable system right now that flattens that over the course of the life of the system, let's say 20 or 25 years? So if I'm paying $100, $150, $200, it just stays constant over time.
Right.
And we call that like minimizing grid imports. So you're just generating a lot of energy on site and then self-consuming it.
Okay.
So we start with those three, and then you can add panels and batteries and like iterate as you please.
So, in your software, the platform that you've built, are you? I'm assuming, okay, that you're taking an evaluation per address. So tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
how you configure how. So if you came to me tomorrow, James, and said, "We're going to electrify your house," what does that look like? What are you looking at? What's the data?
Yeah, so there's two pieces of data that are essential for us to get started, for us to power this sort of evaluation.
Okay.
One is house stress, and the other one is interval bill data.
Okay.
And those are the two. So in my experience in Solar City, like we did on the order of 20,000 residential energy audits, full blown, 3 hours, forward door, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Called it down to 90 minutes. And, it was a constant sort of state of what is the information that's most valuable. It turns out that the most valuable site observed data is bills. Like
Right.
if you have bills, you understand, like you can figure out what kind of equipment's in the house, how people use the home, which ends up being very important. So those are the two pieces that we need. And we're taking electricity as granular as we can get, usually hourly, sometimes 15 minutes, and gas as granular as we can get, which is daily, typically.
Okay.
And with those two things, we've got a suite of like data sort of services and transformations that evaluate like roof geometry and sort of solar radiation. And we've built in like the battery algorithms, charge discharge, and we've got the heat pump curves and heat pump water heaters and all the other things, EV sort of personas. And that's sort of the foundation. And then once you have all that through, you have to run it through a tariff engine at the end of the day to say, like, what is the bill impact for the homeowner?
Okay. So a question on that to help some of our listeners, because not everybody in our audience is a guru like yourself. When you're looking at bill data, you're mostly looking about usage and usage behavior. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I would say that what we're doing, and we've done a lot of versions of this in the past, is we build an energy model with a bunch of like a lot of information that's publicly available. So through MLS, whatever. So it's like, here's the house.
Right.
We build like a fancy model in a computer somewhere. Then we have the bills, and we can use the two together. We can sort of like jam them together to do what we call calibrating the bills.
Yeah. Right.
So now we understand, like we know some physical attributes of the house, and then we have the bills. We can say, hey, this is how energy is used in the house.
Right.
And then from there, what we can do is say, like, if this is today's sort of version of energy use, what happens when we swap appliances, right? So what happens when we swap a furnace for a heat pump? What happens when we introduce an EV? And then what we're doing is building this load profile. So it's like consumption on an hourly basis that really drives like the bill at the end of the day.
So let me ask you this question because I know enough about this to be seriously dangerous. When you're going through your energy audit with a customer, are you getting down to like age of appliances? So we're looking at life cycle, or do you kind of step over all that stuff?
Yeah, today, no. So, and again, I'd say that I've done a lot of versions of that down
Mhm.
to like, hey, how many panes of glass and what's the coating on the
Sure.
glass. Um, I think where I've gotten to in my career is that if you have a reasonable sort of model of the building, and it doesn't have to be that granular, and you do have very, very granular billing data, your level of accuracy far exceeds what you could do with like, let's say a tape measure in 3 hours on site.
Yeah, I have a BPI background, and you can ask all the questions in the world, and doing blow tests and infrared and all this
Yeah,
fun stuff. It's a lot of work for not
yeah,
as much, close get. Now, one of the things that I and look at this as a challenge is, sure, it's great to look at historical usage, right? Because that's generally not going to change a whole lot.
yeah,
But the challenge is, if we're going to make the financial model, how do we forecast what the hell the utility companies are going to charge for their electricity? Now, I'm in the greater Denver Boulder metropolitan area, and our giant unnamed uh, utility company, Xcel Energy, has increased their rates um, over 50% in the last 2 years. And then on top of that, they went to the smart meter technology for time of use. And so essentially what you're looking at is about a 65 to 70% increase in rates because the average homeowner isn't sitting thinking, well, when should I run my dryer or those types of
yeah,
things. And so, yes, I can go back and get historical data from them and say, okay, their average increase of rates have been 5% a year, right? Or a seven, whatever it happens to be. But from the financial model looking forward, it gets a
yep,
little bit sticky because I don't know how much they're going to continue to come back to the PUC. Uh, you know, is their analysis for their PUC rate increases and taking into consideration that, oh my goodness, my transportation costs have now been cut? That's a number that they hardly ever talk about, right? So my
yeah,
panels are kicking back electricity, and my neighbor doesn't have solar, but not like here in our market, 67 cents out of every dollar is spent in transportation.
yeah,
But they don't,
yeah,
when they come to the net metering meetings, they don't talk about the fact that everybody that's offset, they only whine about, hey, we lost revenue. So
yeah.
how do you look at that? I mean, it's really difficult. I don't know how anybody can do it, is to make these forecasts of what it's going to look like. Now, do you have a modeling in your tools to say, okay, their increase looks like this or this, and this is what the outcome would be?
Yeah, so I agree with you that it's a very difficult problem to solve. And this one I think actually requires like perspective from like
Yeah,
whoever you're talking to as well. What we can do is generally when we're accessing interval data for a homeowner, we can get 3 years worth of data.
sure.
So what we're doing is describing to each individual what is your personalized rate of increase over that last 3 years.
Okay.
And it's a little bit difficult with time of use. So like if I looked at just historical PG&E releases, like a PDF that shows what rate increases are typically on a quarterly basis, but sometimes off cycle. If I looked at just those rate increases, it wouldn't reflect how people use energy. Do they use a lot of really expensive energy? Do they use a lot of cheap energy? That sort of thing. So we're
Right.
describing to a homeowner, like for you specifically, this is the rate increase that you're experiencing.
Okay.
Now we do allow a user input to say, because these products are 20 or 25 years in a lot of cases, like it is important to understand or have a view of the world on what that increase looks like.
Right.
We let the user, we give guidance to what we think it is, and we let the user override that guidance. So oftentimes, like the way we've seen this tool used is like we'll pull the rate of increase down to zero,
Okay.
And then we say, hey, listen, like this is the financial proposition. If there was no increase, do you believe there's a scenario where that happens? And it's like entirely unbelievable. And that kind of starts the conversation.
Okay. So the platform that you're providing, this service, how do you monetize that? Is the customer paying for it at each home? Is the solar provider paying for it? What does that look like? Because we all can do lots of crazy, interesting things, but if someone's not making money, that's how it all
Yeah, no,
works.
no, for sure. Like, I think the very specifically the revenue model for Balto is like twofold. One is like is a SaaS company to or
Sure.
software service for contractors today. So
Okay.
they pay for the service. The other thing that we haven't touched on yet, though you started to allude to earlier in the conversation, is like I think we founded Balto on the thesis that for a homeowner to make a decision, two things need to be true. One is they needed to understand what all their options were, and they needed a tool, like a decision sort of support tool to find the best one for them. And then two, once they found that optimal solution for them, they would need a way to finance those projects hopefully all at once, but very
Sure.
likely over time as well. So I would love to see a world where everyone just electrified overnight to the extent that people want to do it and are able to do it. I will support that. I think it's very likely that people will adopt things at the start, whether it's solar or storage or EV, and then adopt other things on year 1 through 5, 7, whatever the case is.
Right.
So we're building a financial product that allows homeowners to finance a suite of services all at once or over time.
Okay.
And then there's a revenue component of that for Balto as well.
Okay, great. So circling back around, your revenue model is working with the solar providers, and they're paying a license fee essentially for that. And so is the service then essentially free? I mean, there's no such thing as free to the consumer.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, like in a very similar way that like there's probably like 4 or 5 like SaaS solar companies in the space that help do design, uh,
Yeah.
or whatever. And contractors are using these tools in the background to generate proposals or do analysis. I would say that this is in that suite of like from a homeowner's perspective, it'd be very similar.
Okay. So are you getting into the space, and you allude there a little bit, are you getting into space for proposal preparations like an Open Solar or Aurora or some of those tools, or do you draw a line somewhere along the way?
Yeah, so I I think that what we've been cognizant of is not trying to duplicate um, existing services that
Sure.
are well developed
Hmm.
and are really great for the most part. So specifically, and not calling out any specific provider, Aurora makes a really pretty tool to place panels on roofs
Right.
and present to homeowners. Like, I don't think that's not like our core competency is in like in describing like where can you put an array, how much energy can it get, and how does that affect all the other things that you may be thinking of. But again, like our version of this is like we're there as a decision support tool to get
Okay.
to the right outcome for a homeowner.
Okay. So let me pose another question, a little bit of a challenge, just because I'm a technology geek. Um, Coming into this industry after 3.5 decades in tech, we saw these innovation cycles that were out of control crazy. Also, I'm old enough, and I think you might be old enough to remember the 286 to 386, in chip. 280, well, it was 8085, then it was
Yeah.
8086, and then it was 386, 486 Pentium, and now we're on like version generation of 10 or 12 of Pentium. Things are happening really fast, and it's going to continue to happen just because the visibility, the profitability, those things. How much of a challenge is that when you're doing the analysis to say, here's your biggest impact? Okay, because we're seeing big gains. I was a little disappointed in Tesla's Powerwall 3. Come on, man, Give me some more storage capability. Okay. I need
Yeah.
more than a day. How about we go from 13 to, I don't know, 60 or something? So how are you keeping on top of that? Because man, that is a challenge. Because I pretty much read and talk about this stuff all the time, and my head is spinning on a daily basis because of the innovations.
Yeah, so certainly a lot of innovations in the industry. To the extent that someone would put off making a decision because they thought there would be the incumbent technology would be supplanted, I think that that is probably the wrong approach.
I agree. I agree.
I think like we experienced this at Solar City with the cost of PV modules like falling drastically. It's we're past like the really steep portion of that curve. So I
Right.
mean, solar is very inexpensive. I do think batteries will end up on the same curve. They will come down in cost
Yeah.
considerably over the next 5 years.
Well,
That being
especially let me jump in there, especially when you have utility companies coming to proposals to people to say, "Hey, listen, let's use your own private virtual network. And so
yeah,
we'll give you these massive discounts to install this, but oh, when we need power, we're going to grab it from you, right?" And boy,
that
that's a
is a
big discussion.
that's a big one. That might be a whole nother one
Oh,
in
that's
an
another whole
entirety.
episode. We'd
Yeah,
get on to
yeah,
talk on that
yeah.
soapbox for quite a bit of time.
Yeah, but I do believe that like again like we've crossed a threshold where this makes financial sense at
Hmm.
today's prices for homeowners. The batteries we can generally think of as like 10 years, so like installing one now and then replacing it in 10 years is probably the right move.
Yeah.
Heat pumps in general, like I think there are some set of people that think of heat pumps as a new technology. It definitively is not. Like
No.
these things have been around forever.
Well, if you look at adoption of green technologies, the only one outside of California, the only technology that has double-digit adoption is heat pumps, right?
Well,
I mean, across the country,
yeah,
solar, I don't know, depends on who you're going to follow, Wood Mackenzie or just
yeah.
general reporting, 6, 7%. But heat pumps are between 14 and 16% adoption. And people are like, oh, wow, that's new. It's like, well, no, that's been around for a long time.
Forever, yeah, yeah. And refrigerants might change, and they often do on some cycle, but like the core vapor technology, compression technology is not going to get supplanted. So
Right.
I feel confident in that. Again, I would wrap it up. So I like the thing that I think there is the technology is robust enough and the economics are strong enough that we feel that if presented in a holistic way, people should be incented to make the decision to do this thing, which is again like that's the only reason why we're around. We want to accelerate this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you got a great approach on that because one of the things that I'll get on a soapbox for about a half minute here. Well, more than a half minute. But when I came into this industry, man, I'm like, I got excited because 3 years ago plus, I put solar on my house. And I was smart enough to look at my behavior usage outside the salesperson who was trying to help me get a system. And I did it right. I predicted increases because my kids were moving out and those types of stuff. Well, I haven't had an electrical bill in 3.5 years. Okay. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are still sort of, they didn't get the right sizing, and hence the value of what you're doing, who still may have a solar finance bill and they still may have a decent electrical bill. But part of that is because they had an increase of rates. So it really gets to be a complex issue out there because people don't understand. The other soapbox I get on is use case. I talk about this all the time. There's no one size fits all. And I
There's
think that's what that people have to look at is what's your use case? Okay. What is your particular use of this? What are you going to future? What efficiencies are going to gain? So what you're doing is a very complex thing. And most people have no idea. They're like, oh,
yeah,
okay, I'll throw panels on my roof and everything's motherhood and apple pie and it's great. And it's like, no, 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 no. You
yeah.
got to stop and look at your use case because it's going to be different.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, our take on it is, the very best solar installers today are taking a 12-month retroactive look at, what your consumption has been and are sizing, a 20 or 25-year product to 12 months in the past.
Mhm.
And our sort of default assumption is the future is going to look very different than the past. Like I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know of a lot of people that aren't at least considering an EV. And I don't think heat pumps are far behind,
Yeah.
and heat pump water heaters. And once, if we're going to build that system and it's reasonably cheap energy, let's say like 12 or 10 or 12 cents, like let's build the right system at the start. Like that's part of like their value proposition.
Right. Right. So, I ask a tricky question or not. I know on your website you guys have been featured in lots of press and stories and stuff. Are you working closely with some of the product manufacturing companies like Tesla or Enphase or others, or are you pretty much trying to stay agnostic?
Yeah, we are agnostic to products. It in the course of like spinning up this model, as you can imagine, like it is computationally rigorous. It does take a lot of inputs from manufacturers, so that's sort of all baked in. In terms of like we're not here to pick winners or anything else
Right,
like
right.
that. Like we're here to like sort of elucidate like all the possible options.
Well, one of the challenges I see, going back to my half-baked point, is the innovation cycles are happening so fast. And coming into this industry with, I'm not like you, I'm not a long-term like solar guy, but I got in, I'm like, well, this is cool, exciting. Yeah, we can help a lot of people. But I see the innovation cycles are mirroring in many ways the days of the early PC of the 286, 386, 486.
Sure.
And it's going to continue just because the R&D's is being put into it. I mean, you look at battery manufacturing here in the United States is gone from like two and operational manufacturing to 100 have been announced. So I think that's one of the challenges. And the average consumer or most consumer just doesn't have access to that data. They just don't. And so I think it's really novel what you guys are doing. Now, are you guys mixing any AI in your algorithms or, without giving away your secret sauce, okay? What does your software look like from a platform perspective?
Yes, so it is very, so again, it's just very computationally heavy.
Okay.
And to me, like mach- machine learning has a lot of like applications to speed up
Sure.
those kinds of processes. So I would say that we're certainly using that, particularly on like the energy modeling of a building.
Sure.
We use an engine that is physics based. It takes a couple minutes to run, and there's ways to sort of abstract that model out with machine learning that
Yeah.
we're interested in exploring. We're not like a machine learning company. Like I just want to be like,
Yeah, sure.
but I think there's certainly applications for at the end of the day, what we want is like a real time tool that allows people to discover like these things. And to the extent that machine learning can aid us in speeding that process up, I think that's the usefulness for us.
What's funny, AI has become such a hot item. But these complex learning models have been around for a long time. It goes back to what we call business intelligence, right?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah, AI is okay to me. It's like, okay, you guys got all excited about this, but when you look at analytics engines, those large learning language models it's been around a long time. It's just become very popular now, and there's issues around that. So, how does a customer engage you guys? Okay, what's that look like?
Yeah, so we're working with like our go-to-market is with contractors.
Okay,
So like we had a couple press pieces come out earlier this year, a few months ago, and any inbound inquiry that we get, we're kind of funneling to our partner contractors. We have sort of like a geographic view of the rollout. So we're starting in
sure.
Northern California. And the reason for that, just to be entirely clear, is like if you down select for complexity, it makes our problem easier at the start. So the two things that we can like down select for are like utilities, right? So like this PG&E, and then also weather patterns, which drive a lot of like, let's say your HVAC load.
Right.
So if we can hold those things constant at the start, then it makes it meaningfully easier for us. So that's where we're starting. And
Yeah.
then we imagine like Southern California seeing to go next, that sort of thing. But
Well, you're singing my song because coming out of software, you always tackle the most complex thing first. because
Yep.
it's easy to scale down. But if you
Yep.
start on the little things, oftentimes you can't scale up. And
Yep.
so that's some pretty ingenious ideas. But you've really been doing software for what, 15 years plus, something like that?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So not your first trip to the rodeo. Okay. So let's talk about the marketplace a little bit. Gosh, between interest rates and 3.0 and just the volatility, bad actors in the industry, we've lost a lot of solar providers, and California's just been destroyed.
Yeah. No, it has been an issue. A lot of the press that I've seen around it is like in the vein of, doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And I've seen sort of subsets of I've talked to a lot of contractors, obviously, and a couple different like buckets or categories I would place them in. There's a bunch that just kind of are hammering and don't know what to do, which I think is actually a reasonable sort of approach to this. There's people that are trying to fight, like the solar lobbying associations trying to fight back against like NEM3. I don't know. I don't have a lot of hope for the efficacy of that effort. Um, and then I think that there's another set that realize that while it might be a somewhat long path, this is actually a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the camp that we're finding like some traction with
Hmm.
is like, so if I rewind this a year or two, solar provided a solution to a fractional amount of the energy spent in the house.
Sure.
So you would just look at, the electricity side of electricity and gas bill, and then you've got extraneous like gasoline, diesel to fuel cars.
Yeah.
And now if we like include all of these things in the pie, there's an opportunity to size systems appropriately for all your energy needs
Yeah.
and then provide other services over time that the homeowner would need. This is also something that we talked about at Sourcing, which was like, hey, listen, through these financial products, whether they're leases or PPAs, we have a 20-year relationship with a customer.
Right.
Now, it turned out we had a 20-year billing relationship with a customer, but I would say that like if you're adopting solar on day one, and let's say that's a $20,000 or $30,000 project, there's probably that amount or double or triple in energy spend over the life of that system, whether it's replacing a heating system or a cooling system or a hot
Right.
water system or whatever the case is.
Well, back in March, I was at a conference and I met with sort of serendipitously one of the regional vice presidents of Excel Energy. And I don't look at the energy companies as the bad guys. They got to be partners with us in this.
Yeah.
And he made a comment that really stuck with me. His name is Jack Isle. And Jack said, listen, the average household has a certain amount of money and a certain amount of credit. And if you look end to end to get your houses, whatever you want to call it, zero, net zero, or, most efficient possible, because that's what I like to talk about. There's a lot of things to do. Okay. You can get power generation systems like for solar or micro wind turbines and those things. You've got conservation tools. So that can go from windows to siding to insulation to roofs. And then you look at the smart side of things, smart controlling systems, the whole house systems. There's a lot to do, and a guy can add up to 100,000 more or more in making that transition. So I feel that and this is just my goofy look. I feel that when this is done right, it's going to take many years. Now, it's great that we can generate more power and knock out and get to more independence, but I think you're on to something here that the fact that the average person's going to have to kind of do these in chunks, you know,
Yeah.
and maybe they can afford to do it all in one chunk, like some of your clients probably can. But most of them, it's going to be a journey because, I have to replace if I put in a heat pump, it might cost me $15,000 or more. Solar might cost me 50. An EV might cost you, 80, all of those things. Windows depend on the age of your house. And so it gets down to a use case. But I think it's a long-term journey, and I think that's what's smart about what you guys are doing, because there are going to be some technologies around the corner that we're not seeing yet,
Yeah.
and
I,
it's
I think
go ahead.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I was about to say that the thing that I'm excited about on the financing side, I think of our goals as sort of like our proximal goals in terms of releasing like the first finance product and then distal goals of where I think it can go. Somewhere in between, one of the other things that we're actively working on is M&V, sort of monitoring verification platform, so that once the things are installed, let's say it's a heat pump, and we projected that heat pump to use energy on an hourly basis in this way, we want to take back information from the house, so persistent connection, bill connection with a house, and disaggregation to understand if what we said is actually can be verified in the field,
Right.
right? And that's important to us initially for modeling, uh, from a modeling perspective. But I think it's also really interesting from a finance perspective. So, like, if I think about a borrower's ability to be lent money, um, in a traditional loan, let's say, like one of the factors should be debt to income ratio.
Hmm.
But if the suite of services that you're adopting, let's say it costs $200 or $100 a month to get the suite of services and it delivers more than $100 in bill savings, it really expands the opportunity to sort of lend and engage in financial products. But there's like a track record that's necessary to do that. So that's clearly not like the first step.
Yep.
But that's like very clearly where we want to go with this. It's like, hey, is there a way to expand the pool of money that can be lent based on the energy savings? And then
Yeah.
also, is there a way to incentivize people to do more earlier? Like if we can get to that view of the world, I'd be very happy.
I recently did an episode with U.S. Congressman out of Utah, John Curtis, and then he most likely will be the senator. Mitt Romney's retiring; he's taking over that spot. And we went down a conversation of performance-based or impact-based incentives. Okay, because
Sure.
not all everything is equal. All right, rooftop solar is going to have a much bigger impact than, say, if I replace my windows or I put in a tankless water heater. Now, that gets to be a very complex model, and not everybody wants to have a complex model with the IRS. But I think we need to take a look at that because not all these technologies are created equal, and the
Yep.
impacts aren't going to be equal. And so I've been like that idea. I think that's interesting because, yeah, just to throw out, hey, 30% of ITC and everything qualifies. Well, that doesn't help the homeowner because they might, without education, pick the lowest cost thing because it
Yep.
still gets that 30% tax credit, but it
Yep.
may not be the thing that's really going to help them the most.
Yeah. I 100% agree.
Yeah, so there's a lot of challenges coming up, but it's an exciting time. I that's why I got into doing these things is the big thing that people need is education. You know, when I was out there talking to homeowners about investing in solar, again, full transparency, I came in this industry like a lot of people, just out there having conversations at the door, getting my nose bloodied and stuff. When somebody finally made a choice to move forward, their number one feedback would be, why doesn't everyone do it? Well, and I would tell them, not everybody has the education, you know, not everybody has the information. And so I really like what you're doing because it helps people because people are lost. They're busy doing their jobs and raising their families or getting ready to retire or whatever. Use cases are all different things. It's really an interesting time. Let me ask you one last question. Well, I got two last questions for you. I'm sure you're paying attention to this with bidirectional EVs. Okay, what's going to happen there? It's really, I think it's interesting technology because if you look at like the Ford F-150 Lightning, it has a 131 kilowatt hour battery.
Yep.
I can run my
Yep.
house for 10 days. But what's my use case? Okay. Am I charging it at work? Am I charging it
Yep.
public? Okay, so that's the Tesla Cybertruck, 193. Okay. So there are people that get on a big soapbox and say, well, that should be my storage. Well, the answer is maybe, perhaps, right? And so I'm interested to see what's going to happen in that space where more and more, because there's only like 13 or 14 models available now that are fully
Yeah.
bidirectional, blah, blah, blah. And I think sometimes the battery manufacturers might be slow rolling that a little bit because they want to sell more household batteries. But what do you think? I mean, what's that? Do you got an opinion on the horizon for these bidirectional EVs?
I mean, it's certainly interesting, right? So someone has a great partnership with Ford to roll out that program. I think they've had some success there. I know some people that say I'm very excited about it. I think there's going to be a place for stationary storage.
Yes, I believe so too. Use
Oh,
case, use case, use case, use case. I
yeah,
stand on that box all the time.
yeah. So that will definitely be a part of the equation. I think that yeah, being able to run your house through a large sort of EV is certainly a possibility, and I think it'll be interesting. You touched on it earlier, like the VPP side of this, which is
Hmm.
kind of like a much bigger conversation. I have less confidence that that will end up being like a thing. Um,
Yeah, I'm with you. I have a hard
yeah,
time. When I add up my investments with a rooftop solar, I got a micro wind turbine, I got a F-150 Lightning pickup, I'm well north of 150. Do I just want to make that available to everyone when my neighbor's done none of that? I don't know. I mean, and then you
yeah,
could go to the other side of the argument is, okay, so I use public dollars to get that done, right? I use tax credits. That's not just evaporative money, it there. So maybe I shouldn't be such a pig about my investment in my home microgrid. I don't know. It's interesting.
yeah. I think that like without going too far down the rabbit
Yeah,
hole on this
I'm
one.
gonna get you back.
Yeah,
We'll have that
okay.
conversation about virtual and shared. So
I think that there will be a bifurcation at some point where one option will be customers increasingly decide to defect from the grid in part, large part, or all. And then there's another more cooperative version of it where we like share resources. And I think that there's some issues that we have to overcome there in terms of like, just from the stationary storage perspective, it's like if I'm going to spend $10,000 on a device in my home, and you're going to try to grab the value from it when I need it most. Like that's there's no world where that works.
yeah,
I do like the cooperation version. I think from a societal perspective, like it's much more attractive than like people defecting and then like all the costs being borne by the people that are still using the thing.
yeah,
But I don't know. I don't. Yeah,
yeah.
I
We're
can't.
definitely gonna have to come back in that one. And I think the entire industry is scratching their head about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really, unfortunately, in renewables, a lot of people just sort of try to vilify the power companies. And the truth is we need them. Okay.
Yeah.
The truth is you can't just 100% drop off the grid. We've got to support those things, but it's complex. And man, if I had the answers, I probably wouldn't be sitting here yapping about it. I'd be some big advisory council. But anyway, well, I
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming on. You got some interesting technology. I like your approach, what you're doing. And I think you guys will be in the mix of helping people get education. So I appreciate that. All right, so I got one last question for you, and it has nothing to do with energy generally. So when I have my guests on, there's this concept of a bucket list, right? So things I want to get done in this world or try before my time is through, right? Well, there's always an opposite in the universe, all right? So there's things you may not want to do. So I call it the opposite. It rhymes with bucket and starts with an F. So it's the it list. Okay. What might be something that's on James's F it list that you're like, nope, sorry, I'm not doing that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I there's probably a lot of answers. The one that's most obvious to me is I spent most of my adult life in the Bay Area and then went to spend several years in New York with Dandelion. Then I spent a pandemic year in Seattle and then moved to San Diego. I think I'm not moving again. I think San Diego's the place. So I think I'm here to stay. So I'm ride or die San Diego at this point. So no more moving.
Okay, so that's your effortless. You're not leaving San Diego area. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate your team getting this scheduled, and we will get back on and have some more conversations. And so if you could you please give out your website so people can find you?
I'm sorry. One more time.
Can you please give out your website so people can
Oh
find
yeah.
you?
Yep. It's baltoenergy.com.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, folks, glad for everybody to tune in and listen. We've had a great guest with us today, James. If you are following us on the video platforms, please make sure that you subscribe and then mark the notifications. And if you're on the podcast platforms, we ask you to go ahead and follow the show. And as always, our sponsors are in the notes underneath the videos and the podcast. So thank you for tuning in today, sharing this time. Thank you to James and his team for sharing their information and their perspective. And until next time, I will say what I always say. Thanks, and make it a great day.